In this chapter, we're going to take a look at how we can prep the model for our final exporting options. This will include creating scenes as well as updating existing scenes. We'll also use styles in SketchUp. We'll also show you the section cut tool to allow us to create floor plans as well as interior sections and elevations. Another part of that section tool allows you to poche the section cuts, and I'll show you a quick tip for that. And lastly, we'll just mix styles and finish off by creating the scenes necessary for an animation. You'll need to open up the Scenes and Styles SketchUp file, and you'll notice quite a few changes have happened since the last chapter. I went through and added a lot of detail within the model just to bring it to life and add some style to the interior. A lot of the furniture were items from the 3D Warehouse, formfonts.com, or the SketchUp Podium browser. Our end result is to create an animation in JPEG of this living room. Having all the furniture and little knickknacks and whatnot really brings the space more to life. Let's click on the overall scene and notice that these scenes are actually out of date, the existing ones that we have. Because we shifted and moved the building, the overall scene really isn't an overall scene anymore. To update it, let's just set our view. And we want to start somewhere around here. And then simply just right click and update. Now the rest of the scenes we don't need any. In this video, we're going to take a look at styles in SketchUp. Styles offer you different ways to display edges, faces, as well as different background and image overlay options within your SketchUp model. Styles can be set on individual scenes, and really just to get a sense of what they look like, you want to go to Window, Styles, and notice that the shaded with texture is the default one that we have here in SketchUp. One thing that I don't like about it is it gives you that hard profile edge, that really thick edge, and it actually makes the model run a little slower. To edit this style, just select it, click on Edit, and in the first icon here where it's the edge settings, just uncheck Profiles. You'll also notice all the various different options that you have just within editing the edge settings. There's also face settings, background settings like the sky and ground. You can display watermarks. Watermarks can be either in the foreground or background. And last but not least, you can adjust model settings. So these are things like section cut widths and depth, as well as showing the model axes or even showing guides. Anytime you make a change to a style, make sure you click the Update Style icon here. Now it's fine to edit existing styles, but let's take a look at some of the various styles that SketchUp has to offer. We'll start with the assorted styles, and we'll just click on the first one here. This style shows the line work as a sketchy edge. It also just shows a shaded texture versus actually having the color. And if you go to Edit, you'll notice the sky setting it has, the different watermarks, underlays, and overlays that it has. Let's go ahead and click on another one. Now this one, the chipboard with the fine marker, offers a really cool watermarked style. And you can see that effect there. Now I typically don't use a lot of these assorted styles. What I tend to only use are these sketchy edges. And the one that I particularly like is one that's called the fine liner. If you hover over the style, it should display the name. If not, you can actually click the details and view it as a list. And you'll see it there, fine liner. And this one I like because it gives a nice little sketchy edge to your element, has that little extension. And of course, you can always edit these. So for example, you can adjust the extension length as well as the level of detail. And these sliders, it's really model specific. A lot of times it's even view specific in a model. For example, here, it really doesn't show enough detail in the stairs here, so you may have to up the detail. It's a fine balance though, because there's a lot of detail in the railings because of all the separate little pieces. And if you like the sketchy edges but want to show the textures as well, you can adjust that in the face settings, like so. So here's how you can mix one of those styles. This here is actually a pretty good view. What I want to do is add this as a scene. And notice that if we click on overall, it goes back to the assigned style that that scene was saved with, which was our shaded with texture. If I go to scene 2, it's going to go back to the fineliner. And since we didn't update the style settings in fineliner, it actually reset those. So whatever style changes you make, just make sure that you update the style before you add the scene. Let's add one more style. Let's go back to the assorted styles. And let's click on this pencil with tracing paper. And this one's pretty. In this video, let's take a look at creating scenes for an animation. SketchUp creates keyframe animations. What we have to do is create scenes, and SketchUp automatically figures out the transition between each scene. We'll start with the overall scene that we have created here, and we'll walk through into the foyer, into the living room, turn around, and then look down from the staircase into the living room. Let's first take the position camera tool and click right on the entryway there. This tool places the camera position right at eye level at that location. Now the overall scene was saved at 30 degrees for the field of view. Remember, you can press Z for zoom and then type in 60 and enter to change your field of view. Let's now add this as a scene, and let's rename this entry. Next, let's walk. We'll walk forward by clicking and dragging. And then we'll turn just a little bit right there. And then we'll add this as a scene. Our next scene, we want to look back on the living room. So let's position the camera right about there. And this is a good shot of the living room. So we'll add that as a scene. Now notice when I click back on scene 5, SketchUp forces us to walk through the wall. Sometimes you'll have to add an additional scene by saving a new location to force SketchUp to rotate in the correct direction. So let's add this as a scene. And now if we go back to the entry, click on scene 5, and then scene 7. There it goes through the wall a little bit, so we may have to zoom in a little bit, update that, and just click back. And then forward. Still going through a little bit, so we'll zoom in a little bit more. That's much better. It's kind of cool. It's going around the bar and the pipe shelf. And then scene 6. And then the last scene, let's try and go up to the staircase here. Something like that there. We'll add that as a scene. And just to test it, we'll go back to scene 6. We're going through the stairs just a little bit, so we're going to have to zoom above. Maybe come in a little bit closer and update that. And even this scene, we could move over just a little bit, update it. So a little bit more. Starting to lose some of the railing, so I want to get that back. That's pretty close. Now let's just go backwards just to make sure. And then we'll go forward. Let's continue to prep our model by renaming some scenes as well as creating section cuts. Begin first by renaming some scenes. For example, this one we can rename as stairs. Scene 6, if we double click on it, you can just call this living room. Scene 7 is looking at stairs. And scene 5, call this bookshelf. Remember, scene 2 and scene 3 were those styles that we used in SketchUp. Now the next thing we want to do is create section cuts. And the first one that we want to do is create a section cut for the first floor plan. The section cut tool is right here. Go ahead and click on it. And notice that it aligns to whatever face that you're currently hovering over, similar to how the protractor or rectangle tool would work. Since we want something on the ground plane, we want to make sure it's in this direction. And then you can hold down Shift, as it says right here, to lock to that plane. And our cut, we want to have right about here. We zoom out, you'll notice it creates this rectangle. And this is the actual control for the section plane itself. So we can select it and then take the Move tool, and we can move up or down depending on where we want our cut to be. And I always try to have the cut somewhere between the window. So that looks pretty good right there. Next, you can hide the section cut either by right-clicking on it and selecting Hide, or on a Mac, you could go to View, Customize Toolbar, and you can bring up these two tools. And this allows you to essentially turn the section plane on or off, or activate it and deactivate it. So in this case, we want to hide it. We then want to click on a top view, pan over. And we could either have this plan in 3D, like it's shown, or we could go to Camera, Parallel Projection, and that will give us a true plan in 2D. And this is what I prefer. Now let's create a scene with this, but let's go to Layers first. And for the plan, we really don't want to show the Google Earth views that are saved here. And we can select the two groups of the neighboring buildings and just hide them. That way we really just see our plan. Next, add this as a scene. And let's call this first floor plan. Let's also take this arrow and just move this to the top so that it's the first scene. Now to create another section, just simply take the section tool. Now let's do a section cut going in this direction. Remember, hold down Shift. And let's cut this halfway through this couch right here. Now I want to flip this so it's viewing the other direction. You can select the active section. Make sure you highlight it so that it displays this blue edge. And then right-click on it and select Reverse. The next feature I want to show you is a feature in the Section tool that allows you to create a group from a slice. And this is great if you need to export individual section cuts into maybe AutoCAD, but it's also great to use as a way to poche or darken in the empty area within our section cut. Let's first display the section cut, select it, and then right-click and create Group from Slice. It creates a grouped object that we can barely see right now, but it's right here. Let's hide the section cut, orbit, and let's move that cut with the Move tool in 1 inch. And the reason why we're doing that move is so that we can see it a little bit better. Double click on it and notice the cut that we have. So remember, hide rest of model is turned on. That way you can see back and forth. Let's go back into it. Now it creates some of the elements as separate groups. So Control A to select all, and then right click and select Explode. Select all again, and just explode one more time in case there's any groups within groups. What we can do now is take the line tool and trace some of these openings so that we can essentially fill in the gaps within our model. Here, draw another one here. Do the entire ground here. Next, select the faces, which are the openings, and delete those textures since we don't need them. And then take the paint bucket and apply a dark black cut through the face of the model. Let's draw another one here. So that now, when we unhide the rest of the model and click outside of this group, you can see all of the elements here are filled in. We have one more here. We want to delete this face, and then that way we can see through. And just doing that little bit of cleanup, in this last video of the chapter, we're going to show you how to include only certain scenes within an animation. Let's first start with our overall scene. And what we want to do in our section browser here is in the details. So make sure you have this details popped up. In the details, there's an option here to just include an animation. So for scene 2 and for scene 3, we want to uncheck that. The same can be said for the first floor, the section cut, and the section perspective. Now, one thing that you'll notice in this overall scene, that section cut or poche that we created, it's going to be visible. So we need to hide it and then update our scene. We're going to have to do that for every scene in our animation. And a lot of times you'll have to pre-select it and then click on the scene, hide it with H as your keyboard shortcut, and then right-click and update. Now the other thing that we could do, and it really depends on how your model's organized, you could uncheck hidden geometry as a property within those scenes. But in some cases, depending on your model complexity and what you're working on, you may need that hidden geometry turned on. In our case, since we only have a couple scenes, it's really not that difficult to just go through and hide that. And although we can't see it here, we will see it when we make that transition. So this is one of those things where you have to get out of view, select it, hide it, and then update. You could also make it into a layer and then uncheck that layer visibility. But again, that really depends on your workflow. All right, now that we have all of our scenes saved, let's move on to the next chapter where we'll explore exporting options. And these include exporting as a JPEG or image, as well as exporting to Google Earth, or even exporting an animation